Well, good afternoon. So what I'm going to do for you today is do a quick demonstration video of how I make these embossed tins. Now they're called tins because they used to be made out of tin, but of course these are probably very thin steel that's been coated with something. So this one is a buff finish. You can purchase these on Amazon and a variety of other places. Etsy sellers will give you some of these. Anyway, this is a particularly pretty design. I've found 3 or 4, 5, half a dozen designs that I think work really well. Now what I've also done on this is, because I use one like this for my own work, I've included a handmade insert out of aluminum. I prefer this over plastic, but it has its own limitations with very small depressions for paints and a mixing area or a rinsing area. And this works really, really well for me for very tiny amounts of precious powdered glass enamel that I mix with oil and I use to paint enamels with. Anyway, the boxes themselves are pretty, and it's a very interesting, I think, application for something that people like to do. There's all sorts of folks who enjoy making useful things out of Altoid tins or used tins like this. And the box itself, without the insert, is really kind of attractive. And the designs that you can emboss, limited by your imagination. Even though I'm using my dies because it's convenient for me, there are a variety of other ways that you could do something similar to this. So anyway, just make a quick video here of how I managed to do this without completely screwing up the box, because again, as I was figuring this out, I'll just share with you, I probably have now wrecked 15 or 16 boxes. Some are pretty okay, but not good enough to sell. And those I'll use as gift boxes for my higher end pendants. It takes a little bit to dial in the touch. So in this video, I'm just going to give you a shortcut to show you something that I did that works pretty well. Okay, so pressing the lids of these Altoid-like boxes, of course, the box itself is almost certainly made out of a steel that is coated with something. It's, like a paint or a brushed finish. You can purchase these at Amazon and a bunch of different places. I think these are almost identical to an Altoid's tin, but not quite. They might be a half a millimeter off in dimension. Anyway, they're sharp little boxes that make a lot of really cool little fun projects. And having a press and all these beautiful dies, I just played around with the ideas of embossing them. So out of the 500 dies I have so far, I've only tested some, but I can guarantee you that most of them won't work. What will work the best are dies that are very flat and medium shallow. In other words, any kind of depth to this beyond something like this dragonfly, and this very, very thin metal of this box will tear. And so in order to do this, but I'm not going to show you the 45 different ways that you can screw it up. And by screw it up, I mean everything from damaging the lid because it was just a teeny bit uneven, to making a real squish out of things. That happens. Anyway, there's a whole bunch of ways to go bad on this. So let me show you what I do that seems to work. First of all, remove the lid. You don't have to, but frankly it's easier and it's not that bad. So these little tabs just fold over. Now, you can get away with this a couple of times. I wouldn't want to take the lid off and on a whole bunch of times because of the fatigue of the metal. Now you want to orient your piece. I like to have things so that when the box opens at the hinge, the design is at the top here. So in order to do that, always make sure that you've located your hinge slots Now what you're going to need to do is play with the urethane or the cardboard or whatever pusher material that you use. Do not be tempted to use a large piece. This is as large as I use for anything. Most of them I'm using quite a bit smaller pieces, this or even half that. And the reason for that is that you've got to be able to keep this thing perfectly centered and just press straight down just on the design. And you don't want to trap the metal to the sides. A little bit is inevitable. You know, you might get some shadow of the dye on this, but that you just can't help. So people are going to have to accept that. But you can do pretty well this way. So what I like to do is align my die as best as I can, right, by eye. Now, this was one of those situations where, not for safety so much, but for the effectiveness of the design, if you are off by 1 to 3 millimeters in your centering, you're going to screw it up. It just won't look good. Now, I'm doing this by eye, but if you wanted to, if these were precious to you, you'd want to do some measurements and just lay things out really, really well. So I'm going to turn the machine on, and I'm just going to align this and press it once. On this design, I find sometimes I need to press again for the tips of the wings, but otherwise it should go pretty well. Yeah, I'm gonna do a little bit, just offset a titch to one side for that wingtip. And then for this wingtip. And that should be pretty good. Okay, let's see what we got. There's the negative, there's the positive. So that looks pretty good. Again, there are several different designs, and I got a little ghost of the die. You can see a little ghost of the die outline. Any more than that, and I wouldn't find it acceptable. But this much, I think, is almost inevitable. So that's a consequence of being handmade. I think this is really fun. It's just a really fun use of the press and some of the dies. What I found is going to be ideal for this kind of application. The flatter, the better. And if it's too shallow, it can be a problem. If it's too shallow, you only have one shot because it won't re-register. So I like the dies that are medium shallow, that have just one piece of depth, like the body of this dragonfly. But I found that what's ideal, here's an example. I just pressed a real quick one in a scrap bottom. That's an example of a little butterfly. Now, where did that come from? This is an example of something I just carved into a chunk of steel. So it really is ideal to use these very flat designs that are quite shallow, and this is perfect for this application. So I anticipate that I will, in the future, if there's a demand for some interesting designs that I don't have in die form, I might just create a couple of designs like this. This butterfly is really cool, but it's a little small for this application, so I may carve a larger one. See if that works. Well, to manufacture the inserts for the mini palettes, you know, there's a variety of things that you could do, and frankly, it's pretty straightforward. I actually think that you could do in all sorts of different patterns and create reasonable and interesting storage compartments. I'm using 18 gauge aluminum, but again, you could use a variety of things. It has a protective coating on one side that I'll have to remove, but I just get this bulk and I cut it to be the size that I want. I will have a little bit of waste on this, but I'd rather have a little waste than not enough. So first, to get the pattern, what I did was create a template in steel. And so this is a piece of 1/4 inch mild steel, and I drilled some 1/2 inch or so hole, not quite 1/2 inch holes. You could drill them all the way through. It would work just as well. I just got lazy and I wanted to keep it simple. So I did that. And then I cut this out with a jeweler's saw, which takes a bit of work, and file it, you know, and this makes a pretty reasonable template. Okay. Now, in order to press the insert, I use a piece of not quite 1/4 inch urethane. This is durometer 90. You could use a variety of different things. If you use 3/8 to 1/2 inch, you might tear out the aluminum. It gets a little too stiff, and you have to cover the entire sheet. If you don't, it will deform. Right. So you put the aluminum with the protected side down, and then I lay the template on top, and I'll just center it by eye. And for me, for these inserts, it's important that that the upper and lower long sides are reasonably symmetrical, because those will be the parts that I bend over to serve as the offset or the stand in the box. These parts I'm going to be trimming and cutting off anyway, so that is less important. Okay, so all you do is load it in the press. Let's make sure it's nice and symmetrical. Yeah, I don't like that. We'll just bring that down. And of course you could measure, but then where's the fun in that? Okay. So now all we do is our standard pressing. Oh my God. Okay. Huh. Okay. Choo-choo. So now what we'll do is we'll press it. And then, to be comfortable, because my press is just a little asymmetric, not much, but a little bit, I turn it, and we'll press it one more time. Okay, now, if you were going to either adjust your pressure to a low set point, or use a manual, you could probably get away with a lot more. What I did was I discovered that I could just send it home as long as I use this relatively thin piece of urethane. And what that does for me then is it gives me this really neat palette that is impressed into the aluminum. And then what I'll be doing is trimming this to fit into the box. Alrighty, so to get the basic layout to bend the inserts, you really just want an outline of the box that it's going to fit in, keeping in mind that you're going to be dealing with the insides of these lines, and it's, you know, it's approximate. You could get really anal about it, but I found I can do pretty well by eye. So what I do, I took a box. Believe me, if you try this, you will have plenty of scrap boxes, because I ruined, at least 2 dozen just trying to figure out a few things. Anyway, you take your insert, and I use this to just align the insert, and then we'll draw the profile. And it's that easy. I found just opening this up helps a lot, because it just makes it super easy to align everything. Now, my next step on these is going to be to use the shear and trim the two ends. Okay, so these two ends I don't bend at all. I cut them so that they would fit easily inside the box. So that means I need to cut about 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch off of each one. Then I'm going to leave these two edges, and those will be bent over. But before I bend them, I'll give a radius to them. And then when you bend them, you can friction fit them and they'll snap into place into the bottom of the box. pretty. So with luck, if I did everything, again, I do it by hand and eye. You could measure. What I need to do next is just simply insert the palette insert into the box. And I like to put a piece of foam under it just to help it keep it from wiggling around so much, because these will be a little loose in there, and I don't want that to be too distracting. Now, if I've done it correctly, I should be able to snap this in, and it should go just under that lip. Excellent, yeah. And there we have it. It's all set to go. Pretty.